I am your host, Alan Bennett. Today's guest in the entrepreneur world is Roxanne Martino. Welcome to the show, Roxanne.
Hi, Alan. Thank you for having me.
Great. Yeah, you're the first attorney that I've had on here. So the service industry is an industry that has a wide brush. And I don't know that a lot of people understand that entrepreneurship is entrepreneurship, no matter what you do. So I'm real excited to kind of get into this story and talk to you about your journey.
Yeah.
So share with the audience a little bit about um, how did you decide that this was the career for you? Where did that all start for you?
I didn't really decide that. I started my first business with my younger brother. We were both in undergraduate school,
Mhm.
um, working for a local media buying agency, and that was in the year 2000 when companies were just starting to build websites and
Mhm.
there was software development and apps were kind of taken off
Mhm.
and I was in school for graphic design, so I
Oh,
have an art degree in graphic design,
okay.
and my brother was a computer science major,
Mm.
and the boss at that media agency we worked for, he would get a lot of customers that would come to him and say, what do you guys know about these websites? People keep asking me for websites. And with my brother in computer science and me in design, we thought we could figure this out. So
Mm.
we learned how to start building websites for these customers. Not too terribly later, while we were still in school, um, that agency closed down, but the websites had to live on. And so we were able to maintain those websites. There was later a business plan competition um, through Arkansas Capital Corporation here
Mhm.
in Little Rock, and we were already sort of running this business, even though we were young and didn't quite realize we were running a business. So we put a plan around it together and submitted it, and that was the first year for the business plan competition. And we ended up, I think, got second place for it.
Yeah.
and so with that, we just kind of continued. We were lucky in having that business, which is still running today, under different leadership. But we were lucky in that we were so young, and um, we didn't have a lot of the risk that older entrepreneurs have. We both had scholarships to school and grants, so we had that to sort of fall back on. And the pressure for steady income wasn't there like some entrepreneurs have to face.
Mm.
When you're kind of young, you can take a lot more risks than
Yeah.
when you're older and you have a lot more to lose. So I think that in doing that, though, and working with my brother, our dad, who was retired from the Navy, so military man all his life, for some reason had always instilled in all of his kids, which there are four. I have three other siblings. That it's always better to be your own boss than to
Mm.
have a boss,
Mm.
even though he was in the military his
Yeah.
his whole career. So, but had always told us that. And what's funny now is that all of us, all of me and my siblings, we all have our own businesses. So that stuck for all of us.
Yeah.
But he was always, having these kooky ideas and inventions and things. Sort of back up what he was saying, because he was
Yeah.
always thinking like, "Oh, I could probably do my own thing."
Mm.
But so um, after running the business for a little while, we were in undergraduate school and had graduated and had run it for, probably like 8 years. And my brother and I both decided to go to law school because we thought a legal background can't hurt anything. It can only help your business.
Yeah.
Um, and the uh, along the way, we run into folks that would just small business owners that just would always need legal help,
Hmm.
could always use some legal advice, but would, maybe hourly rates for an attorney were just, too much, or they didn't have a good attorney contact, they didn't have anybody on retainer. So we had initially gone to law school to help the business, and then um, I then tried to find ways to use my law degree in other ways than just that business, which is when we started the law firm, it was easy enough to say, I see this problem all the time throughout my years of running this business where people need help from a lawyer. Um, so let's start the law firm, and we created a product. It's called Heretofore. It's a flat fee legal product where small business owners pay, a small monthly fee, and they get legal services where they're not on some kind of retainer, and they're not billed by the hour. They can, get legal counsel for various things that small business owners inevitably need a lawyer for.
Hmm. Okay. Wow, that you packed a lot in there. So let's talk about the first step of entrepreneurship, right? And I'll share a little bit about my story. When I left corporate world and decided to get an entrepreneurship, I was absolutely convinced. I knew the type of business I wanted to run, and I knew I had a big plan and had all this laid out. Went to the bank, miraculously got a loan. I don't know what they were thinking, but got a loan. And then the sleepless nights started. Like, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
this is about to be real. So share that journey of what, when you were leading up to getting the business off the ground. Talk a little bit about what that felt like for you.
Well, the first business back in 2001, I didn't have a lot of that. Again, I feel like I was really lucky because we were so young. We just
Yeah.
didn't have a lot to lose. But in 2008, the Great Recession, uh, those that was tough. That was a tough time, and that's when you have to start thinking about your employees, your workforce. Um, the At that time we were still running just the marketing agency, and when times get tough, the first thing that people tend to cut is their marketing.
Mm,
So we had lost a lot of business. So we had to make it through that, and
mm,
of course there's a lot of anxiety and sleepless nights in making it through tough times like that. Um, but in starting the new business, and we have a handful of them, but specifically with the law firm, you just don't know what's going to stick for people. Um, what we what I have always tried to do is, when I think about a business I might start up, I want to solve a problem,
mm,
and I want to be, sort of a core value is to be to be helpful. I think that some people go and start a business because they think they're gonna, I don't know, make a lot of money, or
mm,
they're gonna have this like freedom with their time. Um, Whatever the reason might be, I've always just kind of made it a core value to do something that's helpful to people.
mm,
Um, find out their story and their background, similar to this podcast, what you do, but find out where you can be of use to them, because that's the only way that I think things are going to stick, unless you have some kind of widget, right? Which is very helpful to people. But in the service world, you have to be helpful to people and not just be in it for whatever personal gain. I made a core value to be helpful.
Yeah. You mentioned core values, and some of the Main Street businesses that I've either had on the podcast or I've worked with as a business coach, a lot of them, I don't think they understand the value, no pun intended, the value behind core values, as to how that really is a driving point. They're so busy, making the widget or baking the pies or cutting the grass or whatever it is they do. It's like, no, I just do this and I do it really well. Nobody else does it better. And I'm like, well, what about your mission and your vision and your core values? They're like, yeah, well, about that. So, so how did you come to embrace the core values? Was that something that as you were brought up through childhood, or did you have a mentor? How did that come to be?
Um, Oddly enough, there is a book, E-Myth. It's a lot about core values and processes in your business, and really, it was very much foundational in how we ran our first business. And it really emphasizes the importance of core values and making decisions all throughout your business um, journey based on your core values. I mean, you hire, you fire, depending on it. The type of clients you have, how you market yourself, your company culture, all of it should be based around these core values, because I think the minute that your work starts to not be important to you, to the very like heart of who you are, then
Hmm.
it's just a job, and then you have no loyalty to it, and it really starts to come out to either your customers or your clients. So I think for anybody maybe starting out, the Simon Sinek always has the what is your why.
Hmm.
I think those are very important to establishing those core values. And why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you trying to start this business? Because if you can't answer that, you tend to lose focus.
Hmm.
Right? You're over here and you think you can do this, and then you're over here and you think you can do this one. And um, uh, focus and the longevity of a business is key. I mean, it's key, and I think the way to do that is to really find out why you're doing something and to establish those core values.
Yeah, it's one of the that's great insight, because it sounds very opposite of what a conversation I had with a business owner last week. And that was, they were stuck. They were in a place that they needed to pivot. They didn't know how to pivot. The word that we used last week was innovation. Like, we've got to do something a little bit different. And that's where I seem to find that the obstacles and the pivot points are much more challenging without that type of vision and values and purpose behind what you're doing. So in your journey as an entrepreneur, talk a little bit about some obstacle or pivot point or innovation or something that where the core values and that focus helped you get over that pothole in the road.
Yeah, I think all businesses kind of go through times when they kind of plateau or they get in a rut, like you
Mm,
talked about. And um, when you do establish what these core values are, I think for most businesses anyway, you have to first embrace this growth mindset. And to do that, you have to really be agile and pivot, like you said, when necessary. But I think a easy way to stay, quote unquote, innovative
Mhm.
is to have these like regular check-ins and uh, seek and act on the feedback that you might get from, employees or stakeholders, peers, people around you.
Mhm.
Um, and not only that, but really engaging your network and your customers.
Mhm.
Um, so your peers and employees and things, they can, if you truly get some um, honest feedback,
Mhm.
and you can act on that feedback. That's one way to stay on top of your game and to have that growth mindset to where you're always learning and always trying to evolve to make your product or service better. So there's a lot of new technologies out there where, AI and
Mhm.
machine learning and things, those things, they can really help you to automate and streamline your business. Um, but I think more important is just keeping a pulse on all aspects of the real people of your business. So the employees, your customers,
Mhm.
people around you, peers. I think that just keeps you um, uh, kind of keeps you on alert and helps you determine for yourself when you need to make an adjustment, course correct, or
Mhm.
get over this hump or that plateau where you
Mhm.
can maybe elevate to a next step.
Yeah. So you mentioned a minute ago, you talked about peers, and I know earlier on you talked about your father's influence. Um, I've always had mentors. Sometimes they knew they were my mentors, and sometimes they had to figure it out. So, in your journey of entrepreneurship, have you had some mentors, and what, if you did, can you talk a little bit about how that helped you?
Yeah, we just have been in business so long, kind of have some natural, organic relationships that kind of turn into sort of mentorships. But being proactive about it, depending on your industry, I've found it very helpful to seek out peer groups, a quick Google search, and like some of these, you have to pay fees to be part of these, peer and mentorship programs, but they're so valuable. They're really invaluable because they give you such great insight into, because they can do things like look at your processes and look at your even financials. They can tell you
Mhm.
where you're falling short and things like that. So, yeah, yes, I have some organic relationships where these are business leaders who I can bounce ideas off and things. But um, if you don't have, maybe you just don't have people like that in your life, it's easy enough to network, I think, and maybe seek someone out. But also, if you're just maybe that's not your bag, you Google search, and there are peer groups and mentor programs out there that you can pay for that are really, really valuable.
Yeah, I spent 20 years in the food industry, and that was my first business that I opened. And I sought out people that had been in the restaurant or catering business for a lot of years that were willing to collaborate or willing to share, not give me the recipes. I wasn't asking for that, but it was,
Hmm.
hey, I've never had employees before, and you've got 40. How do you do that? Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, they can really help with specific problems that you have,
Mhm.
right? Like, and also with these peer groups that you might get aside from just a mentor, it's kind of multi-minded. There are a lot of people in this group where you can bounce the stuff off of, and so a
Mhm.
lot of people can give you some feedback and advice, if you will, for that specific problem. Again,
Mhm.
I think these kind of groups are invaluable. even though some people frown upon them because you have to pay for them. But I
Mhm.
just think that it's totally worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you take a challenge to someone, whether it's a peer group or a mentor or whoever it is, um, for me, it's been more about giving me ideas. Some people don't want to be told what to do. They want options or ideas, and then they embrace that on their own. As you take these ideas or challenges and try to implement in your business, especially when there's employees involved, how do you handle that bridge? I'm just a warning. I'm about to go into this whole employee circle with you, but how do you how do you take that idea and plant that with them to get it to implement?
I think it's important when you are talking um, with someone about some issue that you're having. I think it's very important to go at them with remedies
Mm,
as well as the problem. And that way, it's a two-way street of don't just tell me how to fix this, like
mhm,
work through it with me. Um, so really, depending on the issue, I would approach it like, here's what I'm going with. Here would be my approach to a resolution.
mhm,
What do you think about that? And they can then parlay that into, oh
mhm,
yeah, maybe I've I've worked through this before
mhm,
in X way. So I think that the way that I have taken issues to maybe a group or a mentor would be not just take the problem, take a options for solutions
mhm.
and see how we can build upon those to you know remedy whatever issue I came at them with.
Yeah. So when you bring people in, employees, or if they're 1099 or whatever, you bring in people in to help do whatever it is you need done. How do you build that team? How do you know? Because we always hire on skills and knowledge, but people seem to get fired on attitude. So, so when you're building a team out, what considerations should you consider when building a team to fit your needs?
This goes right back to our core values. You can look at their resume and you can see where their experience is and things like that. But in interviews, I have always tended to tailor questions around the core values.
Mhm,
So, for example, instead of tell me about a way you helped increase revenue or something,
mhm,
one of our core values might be accountability.
mhm,
Um, tell me about a situation where accountability came up. And, we know what the core value means to us and how we, circumstances and in which that might come up. But to hear maybe a job applicant or partner explain where they might apply a core value in
mhm,
their life or in work, that's just another way you can uh, determine if those core values align,
mhm,
and that helps you build a team. I also am kind of uh, I've kind of said, if I could hang out with you, we could just have a cup of coffee and kind of be on like a buddy level. That's sort of step one.
mhm,
You definitely want to work with people that you feel like you can communicate with,
mhm,
and because that's very important in a working relationship. But in terms of um, building a team where you guys are all going to have to work together, um, we always start with a core value alignment.
mhm,
Ask questions in the interview around the core values, after you kind of vet out if the resume doesn't match up or what have you.
Mm.
And then if there's just not alignment in the core values, we'll move on.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. As far as, I'm gonna hang on this team thing because, employees are a critical part. You can't do everything, right? You can't do all the moving pieces. And you touched briefly on you have to like them or communicate with them. When it comes to identifying behavioral styles, there's those that are the drivers, they're out to win and gain, and that's who they are. And then you got the others that would rather be in a room with a computer, no windows and spreadsheets. You've got different players and different pieces in the game. When you're building out your business, do you consider some of the task and how to communicate, and I guess where I'm going with this is when it comes to employee reviews or that time to talk about raises, how do you handle the conversations with each employee?
Um, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but even on our performance reviews, we
Yeah.
have our core values listed because in initial onboarding for all the employees, we hammer on the idea of core values because they really are so crucial to our business. And even in our performance review documentation, we list our core values and we give a rating of where
Mm.
that employee is falling. In E-Myth, they talk about gets it, wants it, has the capacity to learn
Mhm.
it. So we can decide um, maybe performance is lacking, but it's because
Mm.
they're in the quote unquote wrong seat.
Yep.
So if we move them somewhere else, um, do they get what that move means? Do they want that move? Do they have the capacity to learn whatever that role would require of them?
Yeah.
So again, back to the core values. That's how we make that determination. Now, in terms of personalities sort of fitting in different roles, um, we also uh, take personality profiles.
Mhm.
So when we're making certain hires, we'll
Mhm.
ask them to do a
An assessment.
personality test. hmm
Mhm.
And we use the DISC profile,
Yep.
DISC. Yeah, we use a DISC profile, and you can you can beforehand, if you have studied the DISC profiles, you can decide uh, a personality that would fit best in this role would be a high D and a low I, or something like that. And you can really make that determination based on the specific role.
Mhm.
Your salespeople are going to be, the social butterflies. They're going
Yeah.
to be, high I or something like that. So
Yeah.
you can employ these personality profiles and really if you study them ahead of time and then give them to these applicants, you can kind of decide or determine if their personalities will fit for the role you're trying to hire for.
Mhm.
for.
Yeah, yeah. There's certain roles that I'm a disc facilitator, so I totally get what
Oh,
you're where you're coming from. Yeah, and for the people that are listening, the talent assessments that you're talking about is a critical piece to building a team to get them on the bus. Are they even on the right bus? Not only are they in the
yeah.
right seat, this is taking all that into consideration, and it's a critical piece. I don't take on a client unless they do a disc profile, so
Mm,
that I know how to communicate with them. Right, I need to
yeah.
speak their language. Right. Yeah, I think that's a great piece, connecting the core values and the assessments and how to apply that is a fantastic approach. And I love Michael
hmm
Gerber's book, E-Myth and E-Myth Revisited. There's another one I wanted to mention. I don't know if you know who David Horsager is, but he's got a couple of trust books out there, Trusted Leader is one of them.
Okay.
So talking about trust, I'm hearing a theme, even though you haven't mentioned the word trust. I don't think you have, but you're describing it. So take just a few minutes and talk about what trust looks like. And I know it's going to go back to core values. I know it's coming. But but especially in the line of work that you're doing, the attorneys are trusted advisors. Financial planners are trusted advisors. That's the world that I live in. I work with those kind of people, and it's their. Tell me about trust, and let's talk a little bit about that. How does that look within your company?
Well, of course, I think everybody wants to work with, especially in my line of work, with lawyers who are trustworthy. And
Yeah.
um, uh, we have ethics rules. Um, thank goodness we have ethics rules that keep us keep us trustworthy. Um, uh, but in terms of business too, even if I wasn't an attorney, I think the trust aspect between your customers and your employees is so
Mm,
important because you know what I've really learned is um, it's really not even about your product or
mm,
your service that's going to keep your customers. It's the relationships that you build with them.
mm,
um, you can you can really mess up. You could really mess up, and to the detriment of your customer. But if you have the relationship with them, oh,
oh,
are you still with me?
I think so. Hang on. I think I see I went fuzzy on you. I don't know what that's all
Yeah,
about. Hang on.
all of a sudden.
Good thing we got editing. Hello. All right. I can hear you. I can see you. Hang on.
Okay,
Hello.
it looks like it looks like your camera may have just.
There it
There you
goes.
go.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. Good thing there's editors. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no problem. Let me think. Oh yes, trust. Okay, I think you can really mess something up, and to the detriment of a customer. But what I found is if you have that relationship with them, you're honest about something, right off the bat. Um, People are very forgiving if they have a strong, trusting relationship with you because they know you're going to make it right. Right, like
Mm,
they've had that, they've built that relationship of trust with you.
mm,
um, and going back to how you want to be, I want to be helpful to folks,
mm,
to my customers. um, Mess up, fess up to it, have that honest and open relationship with them, and that's how you're going to sustain a business. Like I said,
mm,
it's not it's not necessarily about you have the better product, the
mm,
I don't know, the better service. It really is about maintaining the relationship with uh, and not just your customers, your employees, your
mm.
vendors, um, really everyone. If the relationship is there, if that trust has been built, you're going to be all right. You're going to succeed.
Yeah. One of the things that the message that I'm hearing that's the theme throughout this has been the core values, right? So you've been consistent with saying that. And consistency to me is one of the pillars of trust, being consistent, either in messaging or in the acts or in your processes and being consistent and having that connection and compassion and that I'm hearing that theme for building a business, a successful business. um core I'm glad you've talked about core values. I haven't intended to bring this up. It's been organic. I'm gonna use your word there, organic. But core values, you're an attorney and here you are talking about core values. That's, people go, why does she keep talking about that? Well, because it's important, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I want to wrap it up, but I always like asking this question, and I promise you, I'm not trying to zing a fastball past you. Okay.
Mhm.
If you could send a message, an email, or write a letter to yourself before entrepreneurship, knowing what you know now, what would you say to that person?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Um, I would probably say along the lines of the consistency is to keep focused.
Mm,
Uh, I I think that especially when you're young and or just starting out in your entrepreneurial journey, I think you're just trying to see what sticks. And so you'll try something for a little bit and um, maybe it won't work. So you'll move on
mm,
to something else. And I think that gets people in trouble. I think
mm,
if you can focus and again identify what's important to you. You know, why are you doing this? Why are you trying to
mm,
start this thing? And really focus there. Um, it'll all work out in the end. Now you have to know when to throw in the cards. You kind of just have to. But maybe it's not giving up on it completely, but doing like we had talked about and making a real big pivot. You know, maybe the core of what you had intended in starting is still there.
mm,
But maybe you just need to course correct a little bit. But I think I would say, and not to say that I haven't focused,
mhm,
but I do think when I've encountered new business owners, um, and I kind of hear about the journey they've gone through, sometimes those that don't necessarily succeed in what we traditionally think of a business succeeding in is because they've lost that focus.
mm.
So I think I would just say focus, find out your why, and really stick to it. And if you have to
Yeah.
pivot, pivot.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. That'd be a great letter. Can you write that to me?
I think you could probably write it better than I could.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your experience with others. It's very helpful. So thank you.
Sure. Thanks for having me again.